I had been on Haven 7 for 11 days when I finally understood how the galaxy saw humanity. As insignificant, the station was enormous, a neutral world built in orbit around nothing, where dozens of civilizations came to settle disputes over trade, territory, resources, and war. Some of those civilizations had existed for thousands of years. Humanity had possessed faster than light travel for less than a century. Our delegation occupied a small office near the diplomatic sector. The Veyron Empire occupied an entire wing. Their blockade of 6 colonies had created a crisis. Food shipments had stopped. Fuel reserves were falling. If negotiations failed, war was likely. My name is Ethan Brooks. I was Claire Morgan's bodyguard. Most aliens found that amusing. I wore a simple dark suit. No armor. No visible weapon. Nothing that suggested I was dangerous. Claire noticed the looks immediately. They think you harmless, she said. That's useful. She smiled. Then I noticed the cameras. 3 were disabled. The security patrols were wrong. And one Veyron guard had just walked past us twice in 30 seconds. I watched him disappear around the corner. Something was wrong with HFY 7. I just didn't know yet how wrong. Claire noticed my expression. What is it? The security pattern. She lowered her voice. What about it? The patrols. I pointed toward the corridor without turning my head. Same 3 guards. Same route. Same timing. Claire glanced at them. They security personnel. Yes, doing security work. Not very well. She almost smiled. Ethan, you suspicious of everyone. Not everyone. Most people? People who behave predictably. That made her pause. The chamber doors sealed behind us with a soft mechanical sound. Representatives continued settling into their seats, exchanging formal greetings while their attendants arranged documents and translation units. I walked slowly around the perimeter. Nobody stopped me. That bothered me more than if they had. A legitimate security team should have questioned an unfamiliar bodyguard inspecting emergency exits before a high-level negotiation. Instead, everyone ignored me. I checked the nearest emergency panel. The seal had been disturbed. Recently, I touched it lightly. Claire watched from the table. What are you doing? Checking the exits. We in the middle of a diplomatic station. Exactly. She sighed. Ethan. I looked at her. There are 6 exits from this chamber. That's good. Only 2 are actually connected to emergency corridors. Her expression changed. What? I pointed toward the wall. The others lead into maintenance spaces. Claire stared at me for several seconds. Are you saying someone altered the evacuation plans? I am saying someone wants us to believe there are more ways out than there actually are. Before she could answer, the chamber doors opened again. Ambassador Sarek Ver entered with 4 guards. He smiled politely. His guards did not. One of them looked directly at the ceiling camera. The indicator was still green, but I could no longer see the lens. It had been covered. I reached beneath my jacket and touched the small communicator at my waist. No signal. I looked at Claire. We need to leave. She frowned. The negotiations Haven started. I know. Then every light in the chamber flickered once. Nobody else seemed to notice. I did. Someone had just tested the power. I had learned long ago that danger rarely announced itself. It usually arrived disguised as routine. The chamber continued preparing for the negotiations. Attendants carried documents between the delegations. Translators synchronized their systems. Security officers stood beside the walls, motionless and professional. Too professional. I watched one of the Veyron guards adjust his position. He moved 3 steps left, stopped, waited, then returned to exactly where he had been. He was not watching the diplomats. He was watching the doors. I turned toward Claire. Don't sit down. She frowned. Why? Because I don't like this room. She looked around. It seems perfectly safe. That's what concerns me. Before she could respond, Ambassador Ver approached us. Ambassador Morgan, he said smoothly. I hope your journey to HFY 7 was comfortable. It was. His eyes moved toward me. And this is? My security officer. Human security. There was something almost amused in his voice. Ethan Brooks, I said. Vare studied me for another moment. No armor? No. No visible weapon? No. He smiled. Confidence is admirable. It isn't confidence. What is it? Preparation. For the first time, his smile weakened. Claire stepped between us. Ethan has a habit of making simple things sound threatening. I am only observant. One of the other diplomats laughed. A broad Karun warrior leaned toward his companion and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. That is the human bodyguard? He looks like an office clerk. Several delegates laughed. Claire covered a smile. Congratulations, she whispered. They become entertainment. I ignored them. My attention had shifted to the ventilation grill above the eastern wall. The fan had stopped. The chamber's environmental system was still functioning, but the airflow pattern had changed. Someone had closed a secondary vent. I checked my communicator again. Nothing. Then I noticed something worse. Every Veyron guard had quietly moved closer to an exit. All except one. He had moved closer to Claire. I stepped between them. The guard's hand stopped inches from his weapon. He looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke. Then the chamber doors locked. The doors locked with a sound so soft that most people in the chamber did not notice. I did. The sound came from the magnetic bolts sliding into place beneath the floor. I looked at Claire. Stay behind me. She finally stopped treating my warnings as an annoyance. What happened? Doors are sealed. She turned toward them. An attendant tried the controls. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. A murmur spread through the chamber. Ambassador Vare remained calm. Too calm. Please remain seated, he announced. This is likely a temporary security malfunction. I looked at him. No. His eyes narrowed. You disagree? It's deliberate. The chamber fell quiet. Then every light went out. For half a second there was complete darkness. After that, emergency lighting appeared along the floor. Red. The diplomatic table had vanished into shadow. I heard the sound of weapons being drawn. Not one. Several. Down, I said. Claire moved immediately. The first energy bolt crossed the chamber. It struck the wall behind where her head had been. Screams erupted. Diplomats scattered in every direction, some diving beneath the table while others froze in confusion. The Veyron guards raised their weapons. They were not protecting the chamber. They were firing into it. I grabbed Claire and pulled her behind the central diplomatic console as another burst of energy cut through the air. Are they attacking us? She whispered. Yes. Why? Later, a mercenary entered through the eastern maintenance door. Then another. Then 6 more. They wore matte black armor with no insignia. Their weapons were compact energy rifles designed for close quarters. One raised his weapon toward Claire. I stepped out. The rifle fired. The energy strike hit my left shoulder. Pain exploded through my body. My jacket burned through instantly. I staggered backward. For 1 second, the entire chamber seemed to freeze. Someone laughed. The mercenary lowered his rifle. He expected me to fall. I didn't. I looked down at the smoking hole in my jacket. Then I looked back at him. The laughter stopped. I removed my damaged jacket. Claire stared at me. Ethan, stay down. I stepped forward. I had come to Haven 7 as a bodyguard. I had not come here to fight. But someone had just made the mistake of believing those were the same thing. The mercenary fired again. I moved before the weapon finished charging. The bolt passed beside my ribs and struck the diplomatic table. I crossed the distance between us in 3 steps. He raised his rifle. I caught the barrel. His armor amplified his strength, but it also made his movements predictable. I twisted the weapon sideways, drove my shoulder into his chest, and used his momentum against him. He hit the floor hard. I took his rifle. Another mercenary came from my left. I fired once. The shot struck his weapon, knocking it from his hands. He hesitated. That was enough. I closed the distance and struck him beneath the helmet. He collapsed without another sound. The chamber had gone silent. Not because the attack had stopped. Because everyone was watching me. I heard Claire behind the console. Ethan, how many are there? 14. How do you know? 6 entered from the east. I ducked beneath a burst of energy. 4 from the west. Another shot struck the wall. 2 are covering the doors. I moved toward the nearest attacker. And 2 are waiting. Claire looked at me as though she had never seen me before. The mercenaries were beginning to understand the problem. They had expected a frightened human diplomat and an ordinary bodyguard. Instead, they had given me a confined room, limited exits, predictable opponents, and an environment I could use. That was enough. I pulled a table sideways. Gravity shifted slightly as Haven 7 adjusted its emergency systems. The mercenary nearest me lost his footing. I struck him once. He went down. Another fired. I dropped behind the overturned table. The bolt passed overhead. I waited. 1 second. 2. Then I stood. The mercenary froze. I was already moving. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not because I was stronger. Because he had finally realized something. I was not fighting to win. I was fighting to make sure Claire survived. And I was willing to keep going until everyone between us was unable to stand. I could hear Claire breathing behind the console. Around us, the chamber had become a maze of overturned furniture, shattered displays, and drifting smoke. The diplomats had stopped screaming. Most were hiding. A few were simply staring. The mercenaries had stopped laughing. That was useful. Fear made people careless. The remaining attackers spread out, trying to surround me. They were trained. I could see it in the way they moved, covering one another and keeping their weapons angled toward the spaces where I might appear. They were good. They were simply not prepared for the room. I knew where every exit was. I knew which walls were reinforced. I knew where the emergency gravity controls were located. More importantly, I knew they did not. I moved toward the western wall. One mercenary followed. I stopped. He fired. I stepped aside and let the bolt strike the emergency panel behind me. The panel exploded. Gravity changed. Not much. Just enough. The mercenary stumbled sideways. I caught his arm, turned with his momentum, and sent him into the wall. His helmet struck first. He went still. Another attacker rushed me. I lowered my center of gravity and let him pass. He crashed into the diplomatic table. I grabbed his weapon and threw it across the chamber. Then I heard a sound behind me. A rifle charging. I turned. The shooter was aiming directly at Claire. There was no time to reach him. So I threw the weapon. It struck his wrist. The energy bolt fired harmlessly into the ceiling. Claire looked at me. For the first time since I had met her, she looked genuinely frightened. Not for herself. For me. Ethan, you, bleeding. I glanced at my shoulder. The wound was worse than I had thought. Blood had soaked through the damaged fabric. I know. You need medical treatment. Later. She stared at me. How are you still standing? I looked toward the remaining mercenaries. They had worse days. That answer seemed to disturb her more than the blood. The mercenaries exchanged glances. Then their commander stepped forward. He lowered his weapon. Human, he said quietly. What are you? I said nothing. He raised his weapon again. I stepped toward him. Someone protecting the ambassador. The commander stared at me for several seconds. Then he smiled. It was the wrong reaction. You, injured, he said. You, alone. Your diplomat is trapped behind you. There are still 8 of us. I looked at the remaining mercenaries. 7. His expression changed. He glanced toward the eastern side of the chamber. One of his soldiers was missing. He had not noticed. I had. The mercenary behind him moved first. I stepped aside. The commander turned too late. His own soldier crashed into him, and both went down. I crossed the chamber before either could recover. One strike, then another. The commander stopped moving. The remaining mercenaries raised their weapons together. I saw the pattern immediately. They intended to fire simultaneously. I ran toward them. That was not what they expected. Most opponents moved away from weapons. Humans had spent centuries learning that sometimes the safest place was the place an enemy believed you would never enter. The first rifle fired. I slipped beneath it. The second fired. I drove the first mercenary into its path. The energy bolt struck his armor. He collapsed. I seized the second rifle and used it as a lever, wrenching the weapon from its owner's hands before striking him across the jaw. 3 remained. 1 retreated toward the door. I let him. That was deliberate. He reached the control panel and tried to override the lock. Nothing happened. I had already disabled that panel when the attack began. He turned. I was standing behind him. His weapon lowered. He looked at the bodies scattered across the chamber. Then at me. You planned this? No. Then how? I looked at Claire. She was still behind the console, staring at me with an expression I could not read. I prepared for it. The mercenary's face tightened. For what? I picked up the last weapon from the floor. For someone making a mistake. Behind me, the emergency lights flickered. Then the chamber doors unlocked. Not because the attackers had succeeded. Because someone outside had regained control of HFY. The station's security system came back online, and every weapon in the chamber suddenly pointed at the mercenaries. The weapons rose at once. Security officers poured through the open doors, rifles trained on every surviving mercenary. The attackers froze. Their plan had collapsed in seconds. I lowered the stolen rifle. Claire emerged from behind the console. Her eyes went immediately to my shoulder. Ethan, I am fine. You are bleeding through your shirt. I noticed. She ignored me and walked closer. Before she could say anything else, a medical team rushed into the chamber. I stepped aside. Take care of her first. The medic looked at Claire, then at me. You, the injured one. She's the target. The medic hesitated. Claire did not do what he says. They began examining her while I watched the room. The diplomats were slowly coming out of hiding. Some looked at the bodies. Others looked at me. Their expressions had changed. The Karun warrior who had laughed earlier was standing completely still. One of the older delegates whispered something to his aide. The translator caught it. How did a human do that? I ignored them. My attention was on the mercenary commander. He was alive. Barely. Security officers restrained him and removed his helmet. He looked younger than I expected. His eyes remained fixed on me. You knew, he said. Knew what? That we were coming. No. He frowned. Then why were you ready? I looked toward the disabled cameras. Because someone made the mistake of giving me 11 days to study this station. Claire heard that. She looked at me. You've been investigating since we arrived? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? You wouldn't have believed me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew I was right. A security officer approached. Mr. Brooks, we need you for a statement. I looked at the chamber. After she's safe. The officer nodded. Claire watched me carefully. Then she asked the question I had been expecting. Ethan, who trained you? I looked down at the blood on my hand. Earth. She waited for more. There wasn't any. Outside the chamber, alarms continued echoing through HFY. The attack was over, but I knew immediately that the shooting had only been the beginning. The attack ended, but nobody in the chamber believed the danger was over. I knew why. The mercenaries had entered through maintenance corridors that should have been inaccessible. They had disabled cameras without triggering the station's automatic alarms. They had locked the chamber before the first shot and somehow gained temporary control of Haven 7's defense network. That required access. Someone inside the station had helped them. I walked toward the nearest security terminal. Don't touch that, a technician warned. I stopped. Why? Because we don't know whether the system has been compromised. I looked at the screen. Correct. Claire approached. What are you looking for? How they got inside. The technician activated the security records. Most of the footage was missing. Not corrupted. Deleted. I pointed at the timestamps. These gaps. The technician swallowed. Yes. Who authorized the deletions? We rechecking. Check faster. He looked offended. Claire intervened. Ethan. I turned toward her. They doing their job. They doing it slowly. She almost smiled. You becoming difficult. They always been difficult. Behind us, the captured commander suddenly laughed. Everyone turned. He was sitting against the wall with restraints around his wrists. You think this was about her? He asked. I walked toward him. He looked at Claire. Your ambassador was only the door. I stopped. Door to what? His smile disappeared. Humanity. The chamber became silent. Claire stepped closer. What does that mean? The commander looked at her. The Veyron blockade was never about food. I watched him carefully. It was a test. Whose test? He looked directly at me. Yours. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then he continued. They wanted to see how humans reacted when one of their diplomats was attacked. Claire's expression hardened. And what did they learn? The mercenary looked at the bodies around him. Then at my bloodied shirt. His voice became quiet. They learned that humans send bodyguards. I said nothing. He swallowed. They just didn't know what kind. The mercenary's words stayed with me. They had not come for Claire alone. They had come to measure us. I looked toward the captured commander. His breathing was uneven now, but his eyes remained fixed on me. Who sent you? He said nothing. I crouched in front of him. Veyron? A faint smile appeared. That is what you believe. I did not answer. Claire stepped beside me. What were you trying to steal? The mercenary's expression changed. That was enough. I turned toward the security terminal. Get me the diplomatic archives. The technician hesitated. Those are classified. I am aware. I need authorization. Claire looked at him. You have it. The archive opened. Thousands of files appeared. Trade agreements, military assessments, population records, shipping schedules. I searched for one category. Humanity. There were dozens of reports. Most were wrong. Human fleet strength. Limited. Military doctrine. Defensive. Industrial capacity. Moderate. Strategic threat. Negligible. I scrolled further. Then I found something that had been added only 3 days earlier. Human military capability. Classified. The file required a Veyron authorization code. Claire read the screen. They've been studying us. Yes. Why? I opened the document. Most of it was encrypted. But one section remained visible. Project Mirror. Objective. Determine the maximum human military response to a controlled diplomatic assassination. I read it twice. Claire went silent. The room seemed colder. The mercenary laughed softly behind us. They wanted proof. Proof of what? Claire asked. Whether the stories were true. I turned toward him. What stories? His expression had lost its confidence. The ones about Earth. He looked at the blood on my shirt. The stories say your species survives things other civilizations cannot. I said nothing. He continued. They wanted to know if that was propaganda. I looked at Claire. She understood before I did. This attack had not been designed to succeed. It had been designed to provoke me. To record me. To show the galaxy what happened when someone tried to kill a human diplomat. I looked toward the ceiling cameras. They got their answer. Then every screen in the chamber turned black. The screens went black. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the emergency system spoke. Unauthorized transmission detected. The voice came from every speaker in the chamber. I looked at the security terminal. Trace it. The technician began typing. It's coming from outside the chamber. No. It's coming from inside the station. He looked at me. How can you know that? Because the external network is still isolated. The lights returned. Every screen displayed the same symbol. A black circle surrounded by 3 silver lines. I had never seen it before. The captured mercenary had. His face went pale. You know that symbol? He said nothing. I stepped closer. Who owns it? He swallowed. The Veyron Empire doesn't. That answer interested me. Then who does? He looked toward the other diplomats. Someone who wants the Veyron to start a war. Claire stepped forward. With whom? The mercenary looked at me. With you. A message appeared on the central screen. No translation was necessary. Human military response confirmed. Below it, Phase 2 authorized. I felt the room change. The attack had been observed, recorded, analyzed. Someone had been waiting for the exact moment when I would reveal what I could do. I looked at the damaged cameras, then at the ceiling, then at the station map. They, still watching. Claire understood. Can we stop them? Not yet. Why? Because they want us to know they, watching. She frowned. That doesn't, make sense. It does if this is another test. The technician suddenly shouted. I found something. Everyone turned. He brought up a hidden data stream buried beneath the station's diplomatic network. Hundreds of encrypted files were being transmitted from HFY. Not to Veyron space. Somewhere else. I watched the destination coordinates appear. My expression tightened. Claire noticed. What is it? I answered quietly. Earth. The room went silent. Someone wasn't studying our military. Someone was sending everything we had just done directly to humanity's home world. And I finally understood the real danger. They weren't trying to learn what humans could do. They were trying to make humanity show the galaxy. I stared at the coordinates. Earth. The transmission was already moving through the station's network, compressed into hundreds of separate packets. Whoever controlled the system had planned the route carefully. Blocking one channel would not stop it. Claire stood beside me. Can you stop the transmission? Not from here. Then what do we do? I looked at the security terminal. We let it finish. She stared at me. Ethan, they resending classified information to Earth. I know. Why would we allow that? Because it's already too late. I pointed toward the screen. The transmission began before the attack. Claire understood. They were recording everything. Yes. The captured mercenary lowered his head. You finally understand. I turned toward him. Tell me about Phase 2. He remained silent. I stepped closer. You wanted humanity to react. You got your reaction. His eyes moved toward my injured shoulder. What happens next? He gave a tired laugh. Now they know. Know what? That the stories were true. I waited. He looked around the chamber at the damaged walls, the unconscious attackers, and the diplomats watching us. Humans don't fight like civilized species. One of the alien delegates objected. That is an absurd accusation. The mercenary ignored him. You use everything. Buildings, gravity, darkness, fear. His gaze returned to me. Your body. I said nothing. Claire looked at me. What does Phase 2 mean? The mercenary answered before I could. It means the people behind this will stop testing you. A pause. And start preparing for you. That sentence stayed in the chamber. I looked at the security display again. The transmission had completed. Earth now had everything. The attack, my movements, the weapons, the security failures, the identities of the attackers. All of it. I expected Claire to panic. She didn't. She simply asked, what will Earth do? I looked at the dark screen. Nothing. She frowned. Nothing? Not publicly. I knew my country. Humanity rarely announced what it intended to do when someone threatened it. We investigated. We prepared. We waited. And somewhere far beyond Haven 7, people on Earth were already watching the recording. The galaxy had just shown humanity its hand. Now humanity had time to decide what to do with it. I spent the next hour in the security center. Claire remained beside me while station technicians reconstructed the attack. The results were worse than I expected. The Veyron guards assigned to the chamber had never been Veyron security personnel. Their identification codes were genuine, but the records had been copied from officers who were stationed 3 decks below. Someone had replaced them, someone with access to Haven 7's internal systems. By then, the surviving diplomats had stopped arguing. They watched the investigation in silence, their earlier amusement gone. One of the Karun approached me. He was the same warrior who had laughed at my suit. I owe you an apology, he said. I looked at him. For what? For laughing. I shook my head. You didn't, no. He studied me. Neither did I. There was nothing more to say. Claire entered the security center carrying a sealed diplomatic report. Ethan. I turned. The Bayron delegation has requested an emergency session. Why? They claim the attack was carried out by independent mercenaries. I looked at the report. And? They deny ordering it. Do you believe them? No. Neither did I. We entered the emergency council chamber 20 minutes later. Every seat was occupied. The atmosphere was different now. No laughter. No casual conversations. No one looked at me as though I were an amusing curiosity. They looked at me carefully. Claire stepped onto the central platform. The attack on this station was deliberate, she said. Evidence indicates that the Bayron blockade was connected to a wider operation intended to provoke conflict between humanity and the major powers. The Bayron ambassador rose. This is an accusation. It is an investigation. Claire's voice remained calm. We will not begin a war because of this. A murmur moved through the chamber. Then she continued, but understand this clearly. She looked across the assembled civilizations. Humanity will continue negotiating. We will continue cooperating. And we will protect our people. I stood behind her. The galaxy had expected anger. It received something much more unsettling. A promise delivered without emotion. And everyone in that chamber understood that humans had not threatened anyone. We had simply stopped asking permission to defend ourselves. 3 days later, the galaxy had changed. The recordings from Haven 7 had spread across every major network. Civilizations that once considered humans physically weak were reviewing the footage frame by frame. Military academies were studying my movements. Intelligence agencies were examining Earth's history. No one laughed anymore. Claire and I stood near the observation window, watching ships leave the station. Do you think things will be different now? She asked. Yes. Better? I considered it. Different. She smiled faintly. You always give such reassuring answers. I try. For a moment, we watched Haven 7 rotate beneath us. The Bayron blockade had ended. The colonies received their supplies. The conspiracy was still being investigated, but no one had launched a war. Humanity had made its position clear. We would negotiate. We would cooperate. But we would protect our own. Claire turned toward me. Ethan. Yes? Why didn't you ever tell me? Tell you what? How dangerous a human from Earth could be. I looked through the window. I didn't come here to fight. She waited. I finally looked at her. I came here to make sure you stayed alive. Claire was silent. Then she understood. Humans were not the most aggressive species in the galaxy. We did not need to be. We had simply evolved on a world that had spent millions of years teaching us one lesson. Survival was never guaranteed, so we prepared. And when someone forced us to protect what mattered, we did not become angry. We became necessary. Haven 7 continued its orbit. The galaxy continued turning. But from that day forward, whenever humans entered a diplomatic chamber, nobody looked at the simple dark suit and assumed they knew what was underneath. That assumption had already cost the galaxy enough.